Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal Cynthia Watros, the actress best known for her portrayal of Nina Reeves in General Hospital, has always captivated audiences with her on-screen charm and depth. However, beneath the glamour and success, Cynthia's life has been far from easy, filled with struggles that most of her fans could never have imagined. Far from the polished persona that fans adored, Cynthia faced battles in her personal life, challenges that would haunt her for years. Her journey is not just one of dramatic roles and accolades, but also one marked by regret, inner turmoil, and an unyielding fight to rebuild her life. In 2005, when Cynthia's career was taking off, she found herself at the center of a devastating tragedy that would alter the course of her life forever. At the height of her fame, Cynthia made a life-altering mistake. Reports from the time confirmed that Cynthia had been driving under the influence of alcohol, a decision that would have catastrophic consequences. She caused a fatal car accident, and the victim, tragically, lost their life at the scene. This horrific incident became a defining moment in Cynthia's life, one that would not only affect her career but also her reputation and sense of self. The aftermath of the accident was nothing short of heartbreaking. Cynthia, deeply remorseful, immediately took responsibility for her actions. She did what she could to make amends, including compensating the victim's family for their loss. However, no amount of compensation could undo the pain that had been caused. The loss of life and the emotional toll on the victim's family was something that Cynthia could never fully repair. The weight of what had happened burdened her for years, casting a long shadow over her personal and professional life. Despite her efforts to make things right, the emotional scars from the accident lingered. Cynthia found herself grappling with feelings of guilt and self-blame, knowing that a single moment of poor judgment had led to a tragic outcome. The experience changed her in ways that were not immediately visible to the public. Her grief and sense of loss were compounded by the fact that she was constantly reminded of her actions, both through the media and through her own personal reflection. Though Cynthia was able to continue with her career after the incident, it wasn't without consequence. The media did not shy away from discussing her past, and it quickly became a subject of gossip among her peers and fans alike. Her past transgressions followed her everywhere she went, and her image as a talented actress began to be overshadowed by her troubled history. This constant scrutiny weighed heavily on Cynthia, leading to moments of deep reflection and regret. Yet, amidst the public attention, she made efforts to confront her past. In the years following the accident, Cynthia did everything in her power to seek redemption. She attended therapy and rehab, focusing on confronting her addiction and the mistakes she had made. Her battle with alcohol was not an easy one, and despite her best efforts to stay sober, it was clear that this inner demon still had a hold on her. There were moments of triumph, where Cynthia would emerge victorious in her fight against alcohol, but those victories were often followed by setbacks. It was an exhausting and emotionally taxing cycle that took a toll on her mental and physical health. In 2022, Cynthia opened up about her struggles with her past during an interview with Maurice Benard. Speaking candidly about the incident, Cynthia acknowledged that her actions were inexcusable but expressed how deeply she regretted the consequences of that night. She confessed that, at the time, she had been drinking and made the decision to get behind the wheel. "I was at a gathering, and I had a little too much to drink," she recalled. "Unfortunately, it was one of those mistakes that changed everything. But you can't go back. All you can do is learn from it and move forward." While Cynthia's words expressed remorse and self-awareness, it was evident that the guilt still lingered with her, a constant reminder of the choices she made. Despite the efforts to put the past behind her, Cynthia continued to face public judgment. The stigma surrounding her actions remained pervasive, and every new step in her career was scrutinized. Hollywood, a place known for its relentless pursuit of perfection, wasn't always forgiving, especially for someone who had made a mistake of such magnitude. Even though Cynthia had rebuilt her career in some ways, the constant pressure to prove herself was immense. Her success in General Hospital, where she played the complex character of Nina Reeves, was a testament to her acting talent, yet the shadows of her past were never far behind. While her career found new ground, the personal toll of living with that burden remained. Cynthia often found herself torn between her desire to move forward and the weight of her past mistakes. The conflict within her was palpable. She longed to be free of the constant reminders of her past, but it was impossible to ignore the consequences that had followed her for so long. For years, Cynthia had hoped that time would heal the wounds caused by her actions, but as time passed, she realized that healing was not just about letting go of the past, it was about actively confronting it. In the years that followed, Cynthia became a vocal advocate for those struggling with addiction, using her own experiences to help others. She turned her pain into a source of strength, hoping that by sharing her story, she could help others avoid the same mistakes she had made. Cynthia Watros's journey has been anything but easy. From a successful career in Hollywood to a tragic accident and the ensuing battles with addiction and guilt, her life has been a story of both triumph and tragedy. Her experience is a reminder that even those who seem to have it all can be deeply affected by the choices they make and that redemption is not always a straight path. Yet, through it all, Cynthia has continued to move forward, determined to prove that no matter how dark the past, it is always possible to rise again. Cynthia Watros, the talented actress known for her iconic role as Nina Reeves in General Hospital, has often found herself caught in the delicate balance between redemption and self-doubt. Despite her undeniable talent and public success, Cynthia's life has been marred by personal struggles that have followed her for years. The road to recovery from addiction, particularly alcohol, has been a long and arduous one for Cynthia. While she made a vow to change after a tragic mistake in her past, the reality of battling alcoholism proved far more complicated than she had anticipated. Her acknowledgement of her wrongdoings and her promise to reform were not just words spoken in the heat of the moment, they were a sincere attempt to rebuild her life. Cynthia fully understood the weight of the damage caused by her reckless behavior, and she committed herself to turning things around. She wanted nothing more than to escape the guilt that haunted her and to prove to herself and to others that she was capable of growth. But the journey toward recovery was not a straightforward path. Cynthia struggled with the pervasive and relentless nature of addiction. There were moments of triumph, times when she felt she had truly overcome her dependency on alcohol, only to find herself pulled back into its grasp. These fleeting victories were often followed by crushing setbacks, leaving Cynthia feeling helpless and frustrated. The addiction she thought she had defeated always seemed to resurface, reminding her that breaking free from its hold was not something that could be achieved with mere resolve. The emotional turmoil that Cynthia experienced was reflected in her physical appearance. On set, she began to show signs of exhaustion. Her eyes, once full of life and vibrancy, now appeared dim, as though the weight of her inner battles was too much for her to bear. The actress who had once captivated audiences with her warmth and grace now appeared hollow, her energy sapped by the ongoing struggle. It was as though, every day, Cynthia was fighting an invisible enemy, one that seemed determined to keep her in its grip. This inner turmoil seeped into her work, and although her professional life continued, it was clear that the cost of her addiction and her efforts to overcome it was taking its toll on her both personally and professionally. Despite the personal pain she endured, the public reaction to Cynthia's struggles only added to the pressure. The world of celebrity is one that thrives on perfection, and Cynthia Watros, once a darling of the small screen, was now under the scrutiny of fans, the media, and even her colleagues. People who had once adored her for her portrayal of Nina Reeves in General Hospital could not help but feel disappointed and disillusioned when they learned that the woman behind the character was fighting a constant battle with her demons. The shock of it all was particularly painful for those who had looked up to her, as if they had invested in a persona that was now cracked, imperfect, and vulnerable. The public's reaction to Cynthia's personal battles was harsh, and the media, as it often does with public figures, seized the opportunity to delve deeper into her life. The press had a field day with her struggles, sensationalizing her challenges and making her life seem like a never-ending tragedy. Every step Cynthia took in her career was now measured against the backdrop of her past mistakes. Media outlets discussed her troubles, scrutinized her every move, and, often, blamed her for the pain that had followed her. The more she tried to pull herself together, the harder it became for her to escape the shadow of her past. At times, Cynthia felt like she was drowning under the weight of this public judgment. The constant media attention only heightened her internal battles. It was as if she was trapped in a never-ending cycle of self-doubt and shame, and no matter how much progress she made, she was always reminded of how far she still had to go. It was not just the media that added to her suffering. Her fans, too, were often disappointed by the discrepancy between the woman they admired and the troubled reality she faced. The harsh words from critics, the disappointment from loyal followers, and the inability to escape her past mistakes made Cynthia's recovery feel like an insurmountable challenge. And yet, despite the overwhelming odds, Cynthia continued to push forward. She sought therapy, attended support groups, and made sincere efforts to work through her alcoholism. Slowly, she learned to confront her demons rather than run from them. The emotional scars left by her past mistakes began to fade, but they never fully disappeared. She had learned that recovery was not just about abstaining from alcohol, it was about learning to live with the consequences of her actions, facing the pain, and finding ways to heal. Each day was a battle, but Cynthia was determined to win, one small step at a time. Cynthia also took the opportunity to speak out about her struggles, hoping that by sharing her story, she could help others facing similar challenges. She wanted to be open and transparent about her journey, understanding that the road to redemption is often a long and difficult one. While the public may have seen her as weak or flawed, Cynthia saw herself as someone who had faced her worst moments and was still standing. She began to use her platform to advocate for others battling addiction, showing them that recovery is possible, even if it's not linear. Though Cynthia's journey is far from over, she continues to fight. She no longer shies away from discussing her past, knowing that healing can only begin when we accept our flaws and imperfections. Despite the setbacks, the harsh judgments, and the ongoing struggles, Cynthia Watros is determined to move forward. Her strength lies not in her perfection, but in her ability to continue on, despite the obstacles in her way. Through her courage, Cynthia has shown that true redemption is not about erasing the past but about making peace with it. The world may never forget the mistakes she made, but Cynthia is no longer defined by them. Instead, she is forging a new path, one where she is no longer weighed down by the burden of public expectations, and where her past no longer controls her future. She has learned to fight not just for her career, but for her life, and for the strength to be the person she has always wanted to be. However, what is particularly notable is that not everyone understood or sympathized with Cynthia. In an interview with Maurice Bernard in 2022, Cynthia admitted that the incident was one of the biggest mistakes of her life, and she never denied her responsibility for what had occurred. She openly shared how life sometimes presents challenges that are unforeseen, and mistakes become a part of the journey. Cynthia explained, "We were hanging out, having fun, and I drank too much. I never thought that one night of partying could change my entire life. That was my mistake, and I've learned a lot from it." While Cynthia was willing to admit her mistakes, what she didn't fully express were the immense pains and the deep sorrow she carried with her every day. The nightmares of the accident never left her, they haunted her constantly. The guilt and regret gnawed at her heart, knowing that a single moment of poor judgment had led to a tragedy that would ripple through her life and the lives of others forever. These memories were not something Cynthia could easily shake off. The weight of what had happened settled deep within her, making the daily routine a struggle. Her heart carried a heavy burden, and despite the outward appearances of moving on, the internal battle raged on behind closed doors. For a long time, Cynthia sought ways to cope with the haunting memories of that fateful night. She attended therapy sessions, trying to work through the trauma and the relentless guilt that followed her. Therapy provided some relief, but the pain was never entirely gone. It was as if her mind could never fully let go of the images, the sounds, and the regrets that would replay in her mind. Sometimes, the waves of grief would crash over her unexpectedly, threatening to undo the progress she had made. In those moments, Cynthia would feel overwhelmed, as though the progress she fought for had all been for nothing. This cycle of healing, followed by setbacks, made her recovery journey even more challenging. One of the most difficult aspects of Cynthia's healing process was the collapse of her relationships. As she struggled to regain her footing both personally and professionally, many people in her life began to distance themselves. For Cynthia, this loss was one of the most painful consequences of her actions. In the cutthroat world of Hollywood, where trust and credibility are paramount, Cynthia found herself battling not only her addiction but also the erosion of her reputation. People who had once supported her now questioned her integrity and ability to perform. They doubted whether she could ever fully recover and whether she was still worthy of their trust. In an industry where one's past is often held against them, Cynthia faced a seemingly insurmountable challenge. Hollywood, with its relentless pace and harsh standards, offered little room for forgiveness. Producers, directors, and colleagues who had once seen potential in her now hesitated to offer her the opportunities she desperately needed to rebuild her career. The shadow of her scandal followed her everywhere, affecting her chances of landing roles and earning the respect she once had. Each door that she knocked on seemed to close before she could even step inside, leaving her feeling rejected and isolated. The pressure of trying to prove herself in an unforgiving industry took a toll on Cynthia's self-esteem. She began to question her own worth, wondering if she would ever truly escape the mistakes of her past. In an environment that values perfection and flawless image, the cracks in Cynthia's once immaculate public persona were exposed for all to see. Her internal struggle and past transgressions became a focal point for the media, overshadowing the actress's talent and achievements. Cynthia's journey back to professional success was anything but easy. She had to rebuild her career from the ground up, often starting with smaller, less prominent roles. While her talent was undeniable, the hurdles she faced were not just external. She had to fight the doubters and the critics who didn't believe she could ever return to the heights she once enjoyed. More than that, Cynthia had to battle her own insecurities, as she struggled to find her place in an industry that had once embraced her but now seemed to reject her. She had to prove, not only to others but also to herself, that she still had value to offer. Despite the numerous setbacks, Cynthia's resilience never wavered. She continued to push herself to prove that she was more than her past mistakes. She leaned into smaller roles, hoping that each performance would bring her closer to redemption and restore the faith she had in herself. Slowly but surely, her work began to speak for itself, and audiences began to recognize her not just as the troubled woman from her past but as a skilled, dedicated actress who had overcome significant obstacles. However, the scars of her past continued to follow her. Even as Cynthia worked to rebuild her career and gain back the trust of her peers, she found it difficult to escape the weight of her past actions. The wounds she carried weren't just physical or emotional, they were deeply entrenched in the public's perception of who she was. It was as if the public could never fully move past her mistakes, no matter how much she tried to prove that she had learned from them. Yet, Cynthia persevered. She continued her work in therapy, remained committed to her recovery, and focused on rebuilding her career, knowing that she had to prove her worth, not only to others but to herself as well. With each role she took, Cynthia reminded herself that she was still capable of greatness, that her mistakes did not define her. Slowly but surely, she earned back the trust of those who had doubted her. However, the journey to full recovery, both personally and professionally, remains ongoing, as Cynthia continues to fight for her place in the world, knowing that each day is a new opportunity to prove that she is more than the sum of her mistakes. The road to redemption is never smooth, especially for someone who has experienced the level of public scrutiny and personal anguish that Cynthia Watros has. But her story is one of resilience, growth, and determination. Though the scars of her past may never fully fade, Cynthia continues to rise, a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the possibility of redemption, no matter how difficult the path may be. Nevertheless, she never gave up. Cynthia worked tirelessly to return to the career she loved. She took on several smaller film projects, roles that weren't as high-profile but allowed her to regain her confidence and passion for acting. One of the most notable milestones came when she was invited to join General Hospital, where she portrayed Nina Reeves, a complex and deeply mysterious character. Although her career could never return to its former height, she proved to everyone that she still had much to contribute to the entertainment industry. However, despite her tireless efforts, Cynthia Watros' past remained a dark cloud that loomed over every step she took. Legal troubles and the lessons learned from unavoidable mistakes were always part of her life.